All right, let's talk Celtic, because while the calendar's ticking along and we're halfway through August already, there's this looming feeling that things aren't quite moving fast enough in the green and white half of Glasgow. The transfer window is slowly inching toward its deadline, and yet the club still has a lot of work to do. Fans are starting to wonder if the reinforcements are really going to come, or if we're going into a crucial European tie and the domestic campaign with the squad more or less as it is. Now, if you're expecting major transfer bombshells today, I hate to break it to you, but it's all a bit quiet on that front. That's not to say things aren't happening behind the scenes, but from the outside looking in, it's all whispers and waiting, which, if we're being honest, is a little bit frustrating given how important this period is. Still, while we may circle back to the transfer situation a bit later, let's focus on something that actually is moving: the Champions League qualifiers. We now know exactly who stands in our way if we want to reach the group stage of the Champions League, and it's FC Kairat, champions of Kazakhstan, who managed to sneak past Slovan Bratislava in dramatic fashion. Slovan had the upper hand, up 3-1 in the penalty shootout, but somehow bottled it. Kairat stepped up, buried their chances, and walked away 4-3 winners on pens. Wild ending. Even wilder, former Rangers man Vladimir Weiss couldn't handle the heartbreak and ended up getting sent off after going nose to nose with the referee. Couldn't write it. So yes, it's Kairat we'll be facing in the playoff round. The first leg's at Celtic Park, scheduled for Wednesday the 20th of August with an 8 o'clock kickoff. The second leg takes place the following Tuesday, the 26th, away in Almaty. Now, there's no confirmed kickoff time yet for that match, but if we go by their previous home games, we're likely looking at a 4 o'clock start time Glasgow time. That's based on the usual 4-hour time difference between the two cities, with Kairat's home matches regularly kicking off at 8 in the evening local time. Almaty, for those not up to speed on Kazakh geography, is all the way in the southeast of the country, hugging the borders of Kyrgyzstan and not too far off from China. It's roughly 6,000 kilometers from Glasgow. That's a serious journey, about 6 or 7 hours of flight time if the team's going direct, which they absolutely will. No budget airline detours here. And of course, it's not just the trip there, but the return leg too, meaning close to 14 hours in the air in total. Now, some folks online have been calling this a nightmare draw. That's a bit dramatic. Let's rewind a bit. A couple of months ago, when the draw paths were taking shape, teams like Bodo, Glimt, Copenhagen, and Red Star Belgrade were all potential opponents. If we'd drawn any of them, then yeah, nightmare would have been a fair word to throw around. But Kairat? Come on, this is manageable. Tricky, sure, but nothing Celtic haven't seen before. People always get caught up in the travel, in the time zones, in the quirks of going to far-off stadiums. But here's the thing, Kairat have to make the same trip, and in some ways, it's even worse for them. Let's break that down. The second leg, away in Almaty, will likely kick off in the afternoon Celtic Park time. That's a fairly normal time for our players. Most of them are used to weekend matches at 3 o'clock or early evening kickoffs. Nothing out of the ordinary. But for the first leg in Glasgow, with an 8 o'clock kickoff local time, that's midnight in Kazakhstan. The match will wrap up around 2 in the morning their time. That's a massive ask for their squad, having to stay sharp, alert, and switched on at a time when their body clocks are begging for bed. And when you factor in travel fatigue, a raucous Celtic Park under the lights, and the sheer pressure of the occasion, it's clearly to our advantage. If history tells us anything, Celtic tend to come alive late in these types of matches. Think back to the dramatic winner against Shakhtar Karagandhi, James Forrest in stoppage time, or Moussa Dembele's late penalty against Astana. Even the 5-0 hammering of Alashkert a few seasons back. Another late goal in that one too. So the pattern is there. When Kazakh sides come to Celtic Park, they struggle in the dying moments. That could be down to tired legs, jet lag, or just the sheer relentlessness of a Celtic side smelling blood. Whatever it is, it's something we've got to use to our advantage. The bigger concern is clearly the second leg. Kairat are no mugs. At home, they've beaten the champions of Slovakia, Finland, and Slovenia in this qualifying campaign, and they've not conceded a single goal in any of those home matches. In fact, in recent years, they've taken scalps off teams like Red Star Belgrade, Maccabi Haifa, AZ Alkmaar. You get the picture. They know how to make life uncomfortable for visiting teams. which is why the emphasis has to be on getting a result at home. A solid win, maybe even a convincing one. Because going over there needing a result, that's a risky game. The conditions are unfamiliar. The climate's hot. Temperatures have been hitting 30 degrees regularly, and their crowd will be up for it. It's not the kind of place you want to be chasing a lead. Still, the stats do offer a bit of comfort. Kairat's away record in Europe is dreadful. They've lost 9 of their last 13 away matches and only managed to win 1. And most of those defeats haven't come against elite-level clubs. And they've been knocked around by mid-tier sides, which suggests there's vulnerability when they're outside their comfort zone. That's exactly why Celtic need to make this first leg count. There's also been chatter about the scheduling around a tie. The return leg is on a Tuesday, and then just 5 days later we're at Ibrox for the first derby of the season. That's definitely not ideal. But again, the timing might not be as bad as it looks. The players are flying in style, not crammed into economy seats. They'll have the best possible recovery setups, and the travel back from Kazakhstan gives them nearly 5 full days before the derby. Rangers, on the other hand, have to play away in Bruges on the Wednesday night. So actually, if anyone's got the advantage there, it's probably us. And speaking of Rangers, there's been some classic Ibrox drama. They initially decided to postpone their upcoming league match against St. Mirren as allowed under SPFL. Rules for teams involved in European playoffs. Fair enough. That would have meant Celtic playing Livingston and potentially opening up a 7-point gap at the top before the derby, albeit with a game more played. But suddenly Rangers have now changed their mind and decided to go ahead with the St. Mirren match after all. Why the U-turn? Well, the optics of heading into the derby 7 points adrift clearly weren't sitting well with them. That kind of pressure is no joke, especially in the white-hot environment of an old firm clash. Compare that indecision with the attitude at Celtic, where the message has been clear from the start. Play the matches, handle your business, no excuses. It says a lot about the mentality of both camps heading into a crucial stretch of the season. And while all this is bubbling, there's also the wider conversation around squad depth and transfer reinforcements. The Lennon-Miller saga, for instance, is now officially over. The highly rated youngster has joined Udinese in Italy for what's being reported as a club record fee for Motherwell, around £4.7 million. There were whispers that Celtic were monitoring him, but it never really seemed like a serious pursuit. Maybe the thinking at the club is that the midfield's already too crowded. When you've got someone like Paulo Bernardo barely getting a look in, it's hard to justify splashing that kind of money on another midfielder. Still, it raises a question. Are we missing out on the next big thing again? Shades of the John McGinn situation from a few years ago, where our hesitancy cost us a player who's gone on to shine at a high level. Only time will tell with Miller, but it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Transfer talk in general has been a bit of a non-starter. The same names keep cropping up: Bala, Wisher, Braham, Montano, Obert, but there's very little concrete movement. A few vague reports in the papers, some online chatter, but nothing that screams imminent signing. It's starting to feel like we'll be heading into this playoff with the squad we've got. And to be brutally honest, that's not good enough. We all know what's missing. The quality gap in certain areas is glaring, and while we can hope reinforcements come before the window closes, if we don't get through this tie, the pressure is going to crank up fast. We've still got time to register 2 new players before the final deadline for the Kairat tie, next Tuesday at 11 p.m. But with things so quiet, it's hard to see that happening. It's frustrating because we've seen this movie before. Celtic dragging their heels in the market and then scrambling once the damage is done. We just hope it's not another case of history repeating itself. Meanwhile, Celtic B had their first taste of the newly reformatted Challenge Cup, now known as the KDM Evolution Cup, and got off to a winning start. They faced Clyde and picked up a solid 3-1 victory. Callum Osman was the standout, drawing a red card early from Clyde's Tommy Robson before opening the scoring. Sean Ricardo and Samuel Isaguzu also got on the score sheet. Decent performance and a nice bit of momentum for the youngsters. And finally, a couple of updates from the world of former. CELTIC'S, Ismaila Soro, remember him? He's reportedly on trial with Falkirk, having left Beitar Jerusalem. Seems like he just can't stay away from Scotland. He was never quite at the level we needed, but still, it'll be interesting to see him back in the SPFL setup. Also, a surprising bit of news. Dedrick Boyata has retired from football at just 34. He's already jumped into coaching, becoming an assistant for the Belgian under-21s. The hell in our 21s. Feels like only yesterday he was pulling on the hoops. Time flies with everything that's on the line over these next couple of weeks. It's hard to ignore the weight that's settling over Celtic Park right now. You can feel it even through the relative quietness of the news cycle. It's not just about facing Kairat or dealing with the awkward logistics of European travel. It's about whether this squad, as it stands, is genuinely prepared to handle the demands of the season ahead. And that question still feels painfully unanswered. Let's not sugarcoat it. If Celtic fail to get past Kairat, it's going to feel like a disaster. Not just because of the Champions League money or the prestige, but because of what it says about where we are as a club. This playoff tie has become something of a litmus test, not only for the players, but for the decision makers in the boardroom too. The fans know what's at stake. They're watching closely, and patience is wearing thin. For all the talk about stability and long-term planning, right now it feels like we're sleepwalking into one of the most important moments of our season. The deadline to register players for this tie is creeping up fast. While there's still a slim possibility of getting 2 late additions in by the Tuesday night cutoff, it's beginning to feel like wishful thinking. It would take a real shift in gear behind the scenes to get deals done and players registered in time to make any impact. And even then, we're talking about parachuting someone into a squad that's about to face a high-stakes, high-pressure European fixture. No time for settling in or easing their way into the system. It's do or die from the get-go. But let's say, for argument's sake, that we don't bring in anyone new before Tuesday. That leaves us relying on the same group of players that, while talented, is also clearly lacking in certain key areas. The depth just isn't there. Injuries to 1 or 2 players, and suddenly the whole balance of the side shifts. We're seeing players played out of position, others being asked to step up before they're truly ready, and some struggling to find form at all. And that's before the real test of European football even begins. This tie isn't just a football match. It's a stress test for the squad, and the results are going to tell us a lot about whether we're built to go the distance this season. Now you might be thinking, but we've handled these kind of matches before, haven't we? And that's true, to an extent. Celtic have been in this position countless times. We've had our share of heroic nights at Parkhead and gutsy performances away from home. But we've also slipped up in ties that we were supposed to win. And it's not just about what happens on the pitch, it's about how prepared we are as a club, from the training ground to the boardroom, because right now it feels like the supporters are more ready for these matches than the actual decision makers. And here's another part of the conversation that's been bubbling quietly but growing louder. Brendan Rodgers, the manager, knows what it takes to win trophies, knows what it takes to handle pressure, but you can sense the frustration creeping in. This isn't the same kind of project he walked into the first time around. There's more expectation, more scrutiny, and maybe less control than he'd like. And when a manager like Rodgers starts to feel boxed in by a lack of movement in the transfer market, it doesn't take long before cracks begin to show. We're not at crisis point yet, not by a long shot, but if this tie against Kairat goes sideways, suddenly everything will be under the microscope, including Rodgers himself. At the moment, you get the feeling he's biting his tongue, being diplomatic in interviews, saying the right things, keeping the mood positive. But there's only so long that lasts if results don't follow. The fans are watching, the media's waiting, and any slip-ups over the next 2 weeks will bring the whole situation to a head. This is a pressure cooker, and it's heating up fast. Then there's the derby on the horizon. No one's overlooking it, but it almost feels like a second act right now, because everything hinges on how we get through this European tie first. But make no mistake, the Rangers match at Ibrox is a huge test in its own right. It's one thing going into that fixture with momentum, maybe even off the back of a Champions League qualification. But imagine the alternative. Imagine limping into that match after crashing out of Europe, after all the finger pointing and panic that would follow. It's unthinkable, but it's also not out of the realm of possibility. That's the tightrope we're walking here. And then there's Rangers themselves. Their back and forth decision on whether to postpone the St. Mirren game tells you everything. You need to know. They're rattled. The idea of going into the derby 7 points behind us, even with a game in hand, has clearly spooked them. That kind of pressure weighs heavy, especially in a club where internal confidence doesn't exactly seem sky high. Compare that to Celtic, where, at least outwardly, the message has been consistent. Play the games, handle the pressure, and let the football do the talking. But even as we try to focus on our own situation, it's hard not to look over and see the psychological games unfolding. If we beat Livingston and go into Ibrox with a lead at the top, even a narrow one, we're dictating the pace of the season. We're forcing Rangers to chase us. And historically, they don't always handle that well. The flip-flopping over fixtures, the nervousness about public perception, it all feeds into a narrative that they're not as composed as they pretend to be. That's why the next two matches are so pivotal. Beat Kairat, take care of business against Livingston, and then go into Ibrox with our heads held high and the pressure fully on them. That's the scenario we're all hoping for. And it's doable, but it requires focus, intensity, and maybe a little bit of luck along the way. Behind all the football talk, though, there's a growing sense among supporters that the club needs to show more urgency. It's not just about signing flashy players or making headlines, it's about sending a message that we're serious. That we're not content with just dominating domestically, but that we genuinely want to compete in Europe. And right now that message is getting a bit lost in the fog of inaction. The frustration is understandable. Fans want to see progress. They want to believe that lessons have been learned from past mistakes. But when every summer seems to play out the same way, with late deals, missed targets, and excuses, it gets harder to keep the faith. Celtic supporters are some of the most passionate and knowledgeable in the world. They know what a strong squad looks like, they know what ambition sounds like, and they can also spot when a club is treading water. The worry isn't just about this week or this month. It's about the long-term trajectory of the club. Europe should be more than a financial windfall or a PR exercise. It should be part of our identity. And if we keep falling short at this stage, if we keep treating these qualifiers like optional extras instead of mission-critical moments, then what's the real plan? Because let's be honest, if we don't make the Champions League, we'll still have European football in some form, but it's not the same. The Europa League or Conference League might offer decent nights and an odd glamorous fixture, but they don't carry the weight, the prestige, or the financial rewards that the Champions League brings. And in a league as tight and competitive as the Scottish Premiership is shaping up to be, every edge matters, every bit of exposure, every additional million in revenue. It all adds up. It all affects what we can do, not just now, but over the next few seasons. This is why the idea that we can just get through it with what we've got feels like a dangerous gamble. We're talking about a club that should be building from a position of strength. Instead, we're leaving ourselves exposed, hoping for the best, and setting the stage for potential failure. And the fans deserve better than that. Of course, there's always hope. That's what keeps us coming back. That's what fills the stands on cold European nights and sends thousands of fans across the continent to support the hoops. The belief that something special can happen. That, in spite of the setbacks, the frustrations, the slow starts, will find a way. But hope needs help. It needs action. It needs leadership. Because this isn't just about tactics or formations. It's about the mentality of the entire football operation. From recruitment to preparation to match day execution. Are we serious about taking that next step? Or are we just content to do enough to stay ahead domestically and leave Europe to chance? The players have a role to play, of course, but they can only do so much. They need help. They need reinforcements. They need clarity on what the plan actually is. Because right now it feels like everyone's waiting for someone else to make the first move. And in the meantime, the clock is ticking. The games are coming and there's nowhere to hide. So now it comes down to execution. On the pitch, yes, but also off it. The board needs to act. The football department needs to deliver. Brendan Rodgers needs to feel like he's got the tools to do the job. Because we're entering a stretch of fixtures that will define our season. Kairat, Livingston, Ibrox, that's the path in front of us. That's the challenge. And whether we rise to meet it or not will tell us everything we need to know about where Celtic really stand in 2025. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. In a revelation that has sent ripples through the Scottish football community, whispers emerged late last night suggesting that Henrik Larsson, the legendary Swedish striker revered by Celtic supporters, has privately voiced concerns about the club's ambitions. While there is no official statement, those close to the former Parkhead hero claim he was overheard telling confidants that Celtic will need to significantly increase investment if they are serious about reclaiming domestic dominance and competing with authority in Europe. The alleged remark, described by some as both surprising and brutally honest, is said to have come during an informal dinner with former teammates and friends in Glasgow. Witnesses insist Larsson's tone was more cautionary than critical. Yet, the mere hint of dissatisfaction from such an iconic figure has sparked heated debates among fans and pundits. Many argue that Larsson, who once fired Celtic to glory with his prolific goal scoring, has every right to express concern over the club's direction. Others, however, view the timing as curious, given the team's current position at the top of the Scottish Premiership. Still, in football, perception often matters as much as reality, and this murmured warning may linger far longer than anyone expects. The conversation reportedly began when Larsson was asked about the current Celtic squad's chances in upcoming European fixtures, particularly the daunting prospect of facing well-funded continental giants. According to those present, the Swede paused, leaned back, and in his understated way suggested that Celtic's passion and tradition alone might not suffice to overcome the financial gulf between them and Europe's elite. He allegedly remarked that without more serious backing from the board, specifically in the transfer market, the club risks falling short of the lofty expectations held by its vast support. Such comments, while speculative in their source, carry extra weight given Larsson's history and the respect he commands across Scottish football. Rumors quickly spread on social media, with some fans interpreting the words as a rallying cry for change and others dismissing them as idle chatter. Nevertheless, even unconfirmed, the mere possibility that Larsson has voiced such a view has rekindled old debates about Celtic spending policies, their recruitment strategies, and whether ambition at board level matches the burning hunger of the terraces. Fuel was added to the fire when a local radio pundit claimed to have independently heard similar sentiments from another ex-Celtic player, further intensifying the idea that Larsson's supposed opinion might not be an isolated one. According to this unnamed source, several former teammates share the belief that Celtic, despite their domestic success, have been cautious to the point of limitation in their transfer dealings. This view suggests that the club's frugal approach could be admirable in a business sense, yet problematic when competing with clubs able to splash tens of millions without blinking. Larsson's alleged words have therefore been interpreted as an indirect challenge to the current leadership, urging them to match the supporters' passion with equal financial intent. Celtic's hierarchy, for their part, have maintained silence on the matter, perhaps in the hope that the story will fade on its own. But in Scotland's tight-knit football scene, such rumors rarely dissipate quietly. Instead, they tend to snowball, gathering emotional weight until they become part of the wider narrative surrounding a club's identity and aspirations. Interestingly, some insiders argue that Larsson's supposed remarks should not be viewed as criticism, but rather as a reflection of his deep-rooted connection to the club and his desire to see them flourish at the highest level. After all, during his playing days, he often spoke of Celtic as a family and described his time at Parkhead as the most cherished of his career. From that perspective, urging greater investment could be seen not as undermining the current squad, but as recognizing the fierce competition that modern football presents. Critics, however, counter that making such suggestions, if indeed he made them at all, can sow doubt within the dressing room, especially if players feel their quality or commitment is being questioned. The uncertainty surrounding the veracity of the quotes only adds to the intrigue, with some fans wondering if this is media mischief designed to stir trouble ahead of key fixtures. Regardless, the story has now taken on a life of its own, with online forums buzzing, podcasts dissecting every possible meaning, and journalists speculating on whether this will prompt a reaction from the club's decision makers in the weeks ahead. Whatever the truth, The possibility of HENRIK LARSSON casting even the faintest shadow of doubt over Celtic's current trajectory is enough to unsettle the calmest supporter. In football, legends rarely speak without purpose, and their words, real or rumored, can echo far louder than those of the present-day stars. If LARSSON truly believes that investment is the missing piece in Celtic's puzzle, the board will face pressure to prove him wrong through actions on the pitch and in the transfer market. Yet if the comments have been exaggerated, the episode serves as a reminder of how quickly narratives can spiral in the passionate cauldron of Scottish football. For now, the supporters are left with a tantalizing mix of pride in their team's progress and apprehension about whether enough is being done to secure lasting success. In the coming months, the focus will inevitably return to results, trophies, and the question of whether Celtic can bridge the gap to Europe's best. Until then, LARSSON's name will remain on many lips, not for his past heroics, but for the possibility that he has once again called the club to a higher standard. Hello, fan! Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.